Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. My name is Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid, and I want to thank you for joining me. Before we jump into any content, I want to thank those of you who are returning. This is episode 22, believe it or not. And for those of you who are new here, thanks for joining. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube or check me out at therevitkid.com. Also, if you missed any of the previous 22 episodes, be sure to check out live.bimafterdark.com. That's again live.bimafterdark.com for all of the previous 21 episodes. Actually, it's actually 22 because I did a two-parter 2 weeks ago. But and then again, for those of you who are new, usually this actually started as a happy hour. So as you can see, I'm drinking some nice red wine here. And so what this show is it started as a happy hour during the quarantine. I decided to just fire up the live stream and start talking about all things BIM and Revit and related to those things. And I've had some guests on. And that's really what we do is we spend anywhere from an hour, less, more, doesn't really matter. But really talking about Revit and BIM and any really related topics. So thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it. The other thing that's really cool about this is if you're joining me right now, which is live at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, be sure to ask questions and interact in the chat. And so one of the things I really like about this format is that there gets to be a little bit of interaction. It's not just me sitting there making a tutorial and publishing it to the world, which obviously there's value in that too. but there's a lot of value in being able to interact. And so I will be every once in a while, you might see me doing something like this and trying to catch up. The chat is usually a little bit delayed from what I'm seeing and saying, so bear with me as I go through that. But yeah, what we're going to do today is actually run through a couple interesting projects that I've done. And so as a little bit of an intro into why I sort of decided to chat about this today. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let me just jump in and show you the three projects that, hopefully three, depending on how much time, but the three projects that I want to show you today, and then I'll give a little backstory onto why I chose today and right now and this kind of topic. So, with all that being said, so what I did is I actually went through the archives and I pulled out some projects of mine. Two of these are student projects, so during my master's program, typically I think these two are, and then one is a competition project I did professionally. So this is actually one that you see here. It's called Framing the Fairway. This is not a real architectural record cover. I'll get into why that is there. But you'll notice here's the building here and, on the fairway of this golf course, right? And I'll explain the whole background to this building and why we're doing that. The other one is, this is the professional competition that I entered with a colleague of mine. And it's hard to see in this image, but I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see this is actually at Guggenheim, Helsinki, and if you don't know about that competition, I'm going to get into that a little bit. But as you can see, it's kind of sitting on the waterfront. It's got some unique features. If I zoom in a little more to another rendering, you can see it's pretty wild, right? And then last but not least is another one, a project. Scroll through this here. And here's some Revit images. This is a South Asian study center that I did. Again, this one's actually a school project. But what you'll notice, and what the whole reason for this today, is not to show off my student work, because I mean, some of them are kind of cool. Some of the designs are kind of wonky looking back at them now, and I don't want this to be sort of a critique on design. The last thing I want is to have a design crit with everyone here. No offense, guys, but I haven't had a design crit in years, and nor do I really want one. But really, if you notice, there's some qualities of similarities between all these projects, and that's that they aren't just boxes. They aren't vertical walls, right? There's domes, there's semi-domes, there's tilted, slanted spheres, and all kinds of stuff. And so the reason I chose these is because of that reason. It's because they are outside of the box. And so my whole reason for sort of getting into this, if you don't know, I'm actually an adjunct professor at the University of Hartford, which is my alma mater here in Connecticut. And I've been doing that for about 6 years. But even back when I was at the school, in undergrad and graduate, there's always this misconception among designers, design teachers, especially professors, and in sort of the designy world of architecture, that basically Revit is just for boxes, right? And so it's not taught as often in studio as I think it should be. And so I hear it every semester. We talk about it. I hear my students say it. I used to hear professors say it. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to go back and look at my projects. And I think looking back on it now, it's kind of funny. I wonder if the reason I didn't do a lot of boxes back then was because I wanted to prove to professors that, you know, you don't have to just draw boxes in Revit. Maybe, because as I was going back through these projects, these are only 3 of them, but every project that I have, I mean, most of them have some unique features. But the key thing there is that I didn't let Revit dictate how I was approaching the design to my project. So many times I speak with students and I sit in crits and I talk with and I'm trying to help students through using Revit for their projects. And again, I'm focused on students just because of where we are right now. The semester just started, you know, this topic's coming up. But the reality, this goes for designers out in the world, right? For architects out in the world. You know, it's almost to the point where I've seen some students feel like their limitation in knowledge of Revit or Revit itself is holding them back from designing what they want. And that's the last thing that I want from you when you're using Revit. So what I wanted to do is really just run through these projects and sort of explain how I approached the designing and building of them in Revit to sort of break down the process and hopefully give you a insight into the fact that you don't need to be restricted by Revit. You can do pretty much anything you want in it depending on your approach, your design, and your style. And so that's kind of my goal today. I'm going to try and get through all 3 projects, but if we don't, it's okay. I think there's value in all of them, and I could always dig into them more on another episode. If you're interested in it, let me know in the comments and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is quickly read some of the chat before I jump in, because I see there's some chat coming in. Hello from St. Lucia. What's up? Cool. St. Lucia. Nice. Greetings from California. Nice. Looks like State University of LA, so we got some students. If you're a student, awesome. Thank you for joining. This is a great class for you. If not, it's all right. Stan, good morning, Stan. Stan, it's the morning for you, Stan. Gambia, wow. 17 years old, architecture apprentice from Gambia. I'm gonna have to Google that, but I know it's not anywhere near me, so pretty cool. Everyone knows Helsinki. Yes, you think everyone knows the whole Helsinki competition, but there's a few people who don't know about that, and so we'll get into that. Yes, the whole world participated. There were 1,850, I think, submissions total. And then Weston from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Weston, thanks for joining. Hopefully you're safe and healthy. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, Lake Charles, you got a little bit of that hurricane last week, if not a pretty good amount, so hopefully you're okay. And yeah, awesome. Just making sure there's no questions. Sweet. All right, so again, I encourage you guys to ask questions about what I'm showing, what I'm talking about here. I'm going to do some content. I'm going to walk through some stuff, but I am going to keep an eye on the chat because really that's what keeps this thing going on. I mean, the whole point of this is being able to interact with you and be able to answer your questions live on air like this and add more value to your lives when it comes to Revit. So with all that being said, doesn't look like there's any questions. I'm going to have another sip of my wine. And then we're going to jump into this. I should probably start drinking water soon because I'm already feeling a little parched. Okay. Awesome, guys. So let's do this. Let's jump over to my screen. And so the first project I'm going to jump into is actually this one here. And hopefully you can see it okay. It's kind of funny to look at. I mean, this project was done in 2011. So this was over 9 years ago. And it's crazy looking back on these things now. And not to mention crazy the fact that it's 9 years ago, but the fact that, like, as I'm looking back on this project 9 years later, I can remember the process, the design process, the decisions I made, little pieces of the design. Like when you're into a project like this at school, especially, but in the real world too. But when you're deep into a building like this, it's funny how much of those little nuances you remember, which is kind of cool. So the reason this is set up on an architectural record cover is the project was not just to design a house. The project was actually to design a house for an architect. This is, I think, first year grad school. And we had to pick the architect out of a hat, so no one knew what they were going to get. So I actually got Daniel Liebskin, which is kind of cool. So it was design a house for an architect, but also it was to the format of the boards were supposed to be in a magazine. So formatting them in a magazine setup. So I actually I basically just took Architectural Record and studied how they laid out all their sheets and their stuff, their images and whatnot, and I created essentially an Architectural Record article for the house. So I'm going to go through a couple of those. Looking back on this now, again, this is 2011, so this is 9 years ago. There's some things that I still do today. There's some things that some techniques that I discovered on this project that I still do today. There's some things that maybe I wouldn't as much. These renderings were all done completely in native or cloud rendering for Revit at the time. I don't remember exactly which one, but it was either or. And then obviously photoshopped onto some site photos that I took myself. A few things I would probably do a little different just looking at it is contrast and saturation a little bit on the renderings here, but otherwise you get a sense of sort of what's going on here. The floor plans is actually, for those of you who saw some of my other live sessions or are part of any of my courses, the 70-50-20 rule and what I call architectural record floor plans, I developed that technique during this project in 2011. And so basically, the goal was, how can I make Revit, these are Revit floor plans, no Photoshop whatsoever, how do I make Revit floor plans look like those ones on architectural records? Simplify them to a certain amount, but also give you enough information. Room numbers instead of room names, the shadows, the shading, all that good stuff. So, but also just notice in the renderings, there's not a lot of straight walls, right? Oh yeah, this is definitely native Revit. I could tell just by looking at the lovely blotchiness of the rendering in the bottom corner. Actually, I should zoom into that for you guys. Anyone who's ever made a Revit rendering knows all about this. If you're using a gray material or just something goofy with lighting, not great lighting there, you'll get that effect. And then you can see even in the sections too. The key thing here is that none of this is Photoshop. So the building it's not a square. There's a couple squares, but for the most part, things are tilted, tweaked, all that good stuff. But I'm able to make my sections, elevations, floor plans out of it, right? So all of these were just exported directly from Revit. And so that's the key here, is I want you to show that I was able to take a pretty funky form and make a real building out of it. And so I wanted to walk through that process a little bit. Before I jump on, I see a few little comments here. Cheers from Australia. What's up, Shane? Cheers from Australia. I don't know what time in Australia. I think it's probably early morning for you in Australia, or is it 11 hours ahead? I don't actually remember, but that's all right. And New Zealand, sweet. Australia and New Zealand tune in. Man, that's awesome. I'm super jealous of you in New Zealand. I want to go there. I want to visit there. I want to check it out. Going through a few more of the pages, you can see there's a wall section. I was doing structurally insulated panels, and then there's some elevations here. A rendering. There's Daniel Leapskin and his wife sitting there. So this is again as a Revit native rendering back in 2011 with some photoshopping of Daniel Leapskin and his wife. And then there's the final little image there. Oof, that site plan's rough. The saturation of that thing is pretty brutal. But yeah. So kind of interesting. It's fun. Again, it's fun to look back on it. But again, the key, Shane, so it's 9:30 a.m. Okay, so wow. 14 hours ahead? Cool. So the key here is if you're looking at this project, you'll notice that it's pretty unique. It's a unique project. There's a lot of slants and slopes, etc. And if I pull up on the model, you'll notice that, yeah, there's a lot of slants and slopes and all kinds of things. But you'll also notice that these are walls. Those are doors and windows in there. Right? If I zoom out, let me turn on my section box here. All right, let me cut a little section through it for you guys. By the way, this model was made in Revit 2010. Believe it or not. And I upgraded to 2020 and everything came through. Not a big model, so there you go. If I cut a section, you can see how detailed and actually designed this project is. Right? Pretty cool. I mean this is a perfect example to me of something where a lot of people would think that you can't do this in Revit, or maybe Revit's not made for this, or I don't know how to approach something like this in Revit, right? But you can see I actually have walls. These are structurally insulated panel wall types that I made all over the place. They clean up pretty good. There's a couple of corners and stuff, like here and whatnot that are pretty rough over here too. But for the most part, for what this is, it's pretty good. It's pretty detailed. It gets the job done. Down in the basement, I think, was his studio. And there's the living room, and then there's a bedroom loft upstairs, which is pretty cool. So what I wanted to do is just sort of show you the project. I guess actually real quick before we jump into it, I could show a little bit of the layout, just because why not? I am an architect and it's fun to do. You can see there's a master bedroom on the first floor that overlooks the golf course. Framing the fairway is the name of this. So there's these two boxes here essentially just have framed views of the golf course. You have a living space here. I don't know why I did this weird square table there. That's kind of goofy, but so dining, kitchen, living, sort of open space here with a nice little slit wall. Toilet room. That's a half bath, and then there's a toilet room for the master with some built-in closets. Living room, and then you would go upstairs, and I believe there was a second bedroom, a little loft bedroom on the second floor. But you'll notice these floor plans, these are actually just slicing through the model, and they look good. I mean, you get a sense of what the building is, and there's no photoshopping, there's no tweaking of what's there. Basement looks like there's only a full basement under here, and there's a nice little architecture studio. So that's a little rundown of the project. So now, how did I build this? How did I approach the design and the construction of Revit of this project that you're seeing here? So this one this one I really wanted to choose because I used some unique techniques that I think, looking 9 years later, could probably be done even better and smoother and quicker, but still fun. So how did I build this model? Where did it come from? What was the process? And again, feel free to ask questions, comments, concerns about anything I'm showing here in the chat. I'm gonna keep an eye on there. All right, so if I pull up this project, let me show you a couple images. Okay, how did I build this project? Well, this guy. So, what is this ugly thing? Those are pictures of my physical sketch model. Out of chipboard and masking tape. Okay, so what did I do? I actually, this project, and it was partially because I just kind of wanted to, I wanted to learn this process. So there's a program called Photofly in 2011, which I don't even know what it's called anymore, but I believe Photofly was Autodesk, whatever it's become now. So if anyone knows what it's become now, it's photogrammetry software. I think it's like 123D, something like that. I don't know. But anyways, it was in the factory and it was called Photofly. Okay. And so I wanted to try this, but I also thought, a Leapskin house, what a better opportunity or is there going to be a better opportunity to sort of build or design via sketch model? And so what I did is I did very little hand sketching for this project, and I just took this model that you're seeing here, and this is the final, quote unquote, final iteration, but I just sliced and diced a whole bunch of chipboard and taped it together, retaped together, cut new pieces, blah, blah, and as I was doing that, I was thinking of spaces and volumes, and I actually designed this entire project using this chipboard. Okay, so that was fun, right? That was obviously a fun process, something different. What you're seeing there are the pictures that I initially took to try and get the photogrammetry to work, and so then it's like, okay, now I developed this sketch model, photo recap. That could be what it's called now, but you guys get what I'm saying. It's photogrammetry, right? It was called Photofly. I think it was Autodesk Photofly, and it was a labs. It was in the labs and whatnot. But either way, so I spent all this time with 17 different iterations of this thing. It was duct tape, or it was mask tape or Scotch tape, because I literally just kept picking and cutting and putting it back together. And then finally I said, okay, now I want to put this thing in Revit. I want to scale it. I want to start playing around with what these volumes look like and feel like in perspective and so on. So I tried this photogrammetry thing, and unfortunately the only files that I could find from the actual photogrammetry were an FBX file, and because I had Twinmotion open earlier, I actually loaded it in here. And so here's Twinmotion. That's actually my FBX from, look at that thing in Twinmotion there. My FBX from that Photofly software. So you can see it's crude. It's not perfect, and it's still missing some edges. I know for a fact that by the time I had it in Revit, I had a little bit more to it, so I may have taken a few more photos or added a few more photos. And I don't remember the process I took to get into Revit, unfortunately. Whatever came out of Photofly, I had some CAD files, some Max files. I had a whole bunch of files in this folder. Somehow I went through the process of taking it from this and getting some sort of a mesh inside of Revit. And then from there, what I did is I used that as my reference, and I built a mass around it. Okay, so this whole building, right, is built off of a mass. Okay, so when you are doing And this isn't entirely true now because we do have some slanted. We do have the options of slanted walls in Revit. Also, don't forget this is 2011 Revit. So I don't even know when massing came into play. Maybe this is one of the first years it came into play. I don't even remember. But either way, so I took whatever final file type I decided to get it into, and again, unfortunately I can't find the file type I brought into Revit with. I might have eventually got it as a 3D CAD and then brought it into Revit, but either way. And then I just sat there and I modeled this mass, tracing essentially my 3D or my sketch model. Okay, and so when it comes to these projects that I'm going to be showing you, the key to understanding how to use Revit for them. Actually, I'm going to go back to camera for a second because this is sort of all of these. Anytime that you're breaking away from Revit's core elements like drawing straight walls and whatnot, other than angles and curves, I guess. If you're going slanted and non-coplanar, what you'll notice is that all of these projects have something in common. It's that there's some kind of a form, an element that's helping drive the Revit model. Okay, and what I mean by that is think about it like paper mache. Right, so with paper mache, you're gonna blow up, like anyone who hasn't done that before. The typical is you blow up like a balloon, you cover it in paper mache, and then you pop the balloon, and then what's left is the paper mache, which is just paper and glue basically. So what we're doing here is we're building that balloon. We're building the frame that we're gonna apply all of our Revit elements to, and then we're gonna pop the balloon. The problem is you don't want to pop the balloon. You want to keep the balloon in the model. You want to keep it somewhere that you can always refer back to it. Because once you go down this road of I'm going to build my model, whether it's masked out, simple geometry, or whether it in like the family editor or just extrusions, or it's massing like I'm showing here, that now is that's driving essentially your entire model. What you're going to see in a couple other examples is that you don't have to do it for your entire model. You only have to do it for the things that need to be done. Okay, so the things that are slanted and so on. But so I took this sketch model. Sorry, I see Scoured is saying FBX to max is probably the way to do it in 2010. Yep, that's a good point. So there was an FBX file and there was a max file. I unfortunately don't have max installed on this machine, so I couldn't open that to take a look at it. But most likely that's what I did, was FBX, brought the FBX into max, tried to clean up some sort of a mesh, and then brought it into Revit as a reference file. So thank you, Scoured. Good to see you again, man. Thanks for joining. Okay. So that's kind of how this developed. Is I had a sketch model. I built a mass to sort of follow along with that sketch model. I should say also when I brought in whether it was CAD or whatever form I brought in, I was able to scale it. And so generally speaking, I got a scale out of it. And then I do believe I probably massaged this mass a little bit as I started scaling it and realizing what spaces might be. So adding things like the wing wall you see here and whatnot, how big are those, how big do those not need to be, and so on. So you build a mass, or and I keep calling it a mass, but the reality is you don't need to just use conceptual massing. You could simply use typical standard extrusion types, revolves, etc. And so what you do with this is once it's brought into my project, okay. So once you have a mass, and this is sort of the process that I would use on any of these designs where it's breaking away. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this mass outside of here. Oops, I guess I should hide that building too. There we go. Uh-oh. Okay. So you can see I have the mass here and there's my building. So the reason why you need to, once you use this process, once you go through with this process, you're beholden to the mass, is that this is what's going to drive your geometry, okay? So what happens is if I have a wall type, so if I go over here, this is a wall type, basic wall. So this is just a wall, right? If I go in here, I say architecture wall, I can draw a wall and I've got that exact wall type. But when I'm placing walls, I also have an option right here for pick faces. Okay, so if I click pick faces, you'll notice it's actually looking around and it's highlighting. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah, you can see it. It's highlighting these faces. So what I can do is I can actually go around and I can click the faces of my mass. I just clicked it twice there. Let's try that again. There we go. Right? And so now if I hide the mass, look what I have left. I have the faces. So just like that, now I have walls. And remember, these are walls. So if I really wanted to, I can put windows and doors inside them. Right? Yes, you can slant them now, but you couldn't slant them back in 2011. You'd have to make a family that worked for it, or you build it into the mass. But the key here is that when you're going through this process, so it actually works really well for architecture when you think about the process of designing. Building a nondescript or a less detailed mass is helpful, right? Just like the sketch model. It becomes your sketch model virtually. And so, the way I suggest you do this is you build some sort of a form of it. And again, it doesn't have to be fancy and complicated like I had here. It could just be some blocks and extrusions with revolves and sweeps, right? But once you do that, then you start sort of skinning it. You do that paper mache I was talking about. But the key is not to ever, ever, ever delete that original mass. So this mass here, okay, this needs to stay in your project forever. Because once you start modeling from it, picking faces, using it as references, the only way to modify those faces is via that mass. Okay, so it's the only way to do it. So I don't want to, I'm going to duplicate this type. I don't think that's going to work. I'm going to edit this family and I'm going to save as so that I can modify it and show you what happens. Just to give everyone a sense. And I'm sorry I used Revit on the other screen again, so I'm going to keep dragging stuff back and forth. I apologize. So I just saved this as a different name. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this face here and I'm going to pull it out like that. Okay, so all I did was move that face. That is how you have to modify your model from now. So now if I load this back into my project, and I think it's this one. Probably should have renamed these. And I flip this out to Conceptual Mass 6. That's fine. Oh, this is... I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have renamed it. Let's do that again. So, let me do this again. Because I did the name, it lost the host. So remember I said don't delete it? That's what I did. I deleted it. So let me just do this one more time. So I brought in Conceptual Mass 6, which is right here. And then I applied to face. So let me just draw these walls again. Just bear with me here, folks. We are live. Okay, so there's my... So there's there. So now I'm going to go back into this family. I'm going to modify this again. So I'm going to pull this back. And maybe just for fun, I'll take this corner and I'll stretch it down a little bit. So we made a pretty big change there. So now if I go back into my project and I override it, what you'll notice is that the mass right here is changed. Okay, this was my balloon, my paper mache. But now all of these faces need to be updated, right? And so you could select all of them. Oops. I'm getting click happy here. And then when you click update to face, see how it says update to face right there? Remember, these walls are driven by the face. That's the only way you're ever going to be able to modify them. If you delete the face, you cannot modify the walls anymore. So if I click update to face, you'll notice they adjust and they shift back to the wall. So this is why it's extremely important that when you use this method, if you start breaking away from from horizontal, vertical elements, you can do whatever you want. You can use Revit like you normally would, but you have to pay attention to that mass or that object, whatever it is, and keep the thing in your model forever and ever and ever and ever. Okay. So sweet. I'm gonna check out some messages real quick. Is it possible to use Format? Yes. So when I did this project, Format didn't exist. And the cool thing about this process is, depending on what you're using to create your mass, obviously is going to change it a little bit. Here, because I was using this Photogrammetry program and it brought in, I couldn't even click faces, so I had to sort of remodel it. But if you use that method and that methodology even, Format, I believe you could bring in and actually be able to click the faces, so it'd be perfect and good to go. But let's say you made some sort of massy thing in 3D Max or Blender or something like that, whatever. You may not be able to use that surface as a face for your walls to attach to, but you can certainly bring it in somehow, whatever version or file type you need. You can certainly bring it into your project and use it as reference to model in Revit if you need to, right? So trying to remodel that thing in native Revit. If you really wanted to go down the road of you needed it to be exact and all that stuff, well, you're going to be going down a different path as far as I'm concerned. So Ernesto's got a question here. Is there a way to pick new host if the mask gets deleted or bring in a mask from previous model? No. So that's the thing. So once you use by face, that's it, man. So this is why it's so important. This is why I stress it so much, because this process works. I've used it on dozens and dozens of projects, and it works fine. And it allows you to do the things that I'm showing you here. But you have to remember that is how it's set up. Okay. So there's different ways. You could hide them. You could use filters. You could just do show. If you're using massing, you could do show mask, don't show mask, etc. If it gets deleted, you're in some trouble. If it gets deleted, you can't. The only option you have is update to face, right? So if there's no more face, So if there's no more face and you click update to face, this is what you get. Faces defining this element cannot be reacquired. Okay, so what are your options? Guess what? Delete checked. That's it. So again, I'm stressing this a lot because this can be an extremely useful and powerful way to use Revit, especially when you're in school and when you're designing in general, right? If you're breaking the mold, so to speak, or thinking outside the box, as I titled this one. But you have to make sure that you are paying attention to that mask, and whatever you need to put in place to make sure that it doesn't get deleted, and how you do it is up to you. Filters is a really good one. Unfortunately, design options won't work unless the walls are within the design option, which causes some issues there, right? So hopefully that answers your questions, Ernesto. Thanks for the question. That's a good one. So the process, it's as simple as that. And I know I'm saying simple, but really it is that simple. Once you get a mask done, it's not all that bad. There's a couple things to think of. Notice how my walls are shaping really nicely here. Because it's a mask and you're doing it by face, you want to make sure... Sorry, I'm zooming around there a little bit on you guys. Let me get this mask out again. Unhide. So what you want to make sure is that this mask... You want to split and join faces and get edges where you want walls to stop, and that's another key important piece too. So if you notice when I highlighted these these walls here, and especially this one here, if I hide these, notice how these are stopping and where they should, right? They're getting stopped here. They're not going all the way down to the face, and that's done on purpose. That's in the mask itself. Oops, that's a different project. So in the mask itself, you'll notice this face, right? This face stops right there. And that's just by using join geometry and paying attention to how your stuff folds. The other thing is, you'll notice I have some recesses here. So like, see how I built in this void? And then on this side too, where is it? I built in a void here. The nice thing about that is, if you wanted your windows to be slanted and follow along with it, I'm actually using those voids to make my curtain panels, for example. So these are just windows there, but if I zoom around here, you'll notice right in here, I have a curtain system. Let me try and get a good view for you. Ooh, that refresh is driving me nuts. So I have a curtain system in here, okay, that's showing the panel, and then in here as well, you'll notice by doing that void, I can now do a curtain system along this whole edge here. Okay, I should do, which it looked pretty cool before when I did it, is I launched it in Enscape just for fun. Enscape didn't exist as well back in 2011. At least if it did, I didn't know about it. Dave said, I've used this process similar to create curtain systems and ceilings for things like wood slats. Yep, exactly. So and what you'll see is once I get into another example, is that the second you're going like this, and of course this is changing a little bit now that Revit has slanted walls. You can start playing around with those to some extent. But even if you had a slanted wall that has, it's non-coplanar, it's doing like a wavy sweep thing, the second you do that, you have to know that you're going to be creating a sacrificial mass, essentially. Okay, and I call it sacrificial because the reality is, it's not being used for anything other than, orthogonals on. It's not being used for anything other than drawing the geometry. Let's check this thing out just for fun. Why not? Let me hide the mass in this view. And what's kind of cool is my most of my materials, my custom materials folder has been carried through for all these years, which is kind of neat. So a lot of the materials actually came through, for better or worse. I mean, some of these are pretty rough, but let's just quickly jump into this because it's fun. All right, so before I jump, I'm gonna zoom around the model just for fun. And before I jump into a different project, just let me know if you have any questions on this particular project and some of these processes. It's actually pretty neat. So remember, this was set up for, this was set up for just native Revit rendering, and because of that, it's a perfect tool for Enscape, because all of my materials, everything was already built in there. All right, so there's my slit wall I was talking about. There's some kind of focal length on here I gotta turn off. Yeah. Hold on a second. You may not be able to see it, but I can see it. Depth of field is on. Get out of here, depth of field. Okay. Oh, that concrete looks pretty nice. Check that out. Not bad. Pretty cool. Pretty cool that a project that was done in 2011, I can flip into like this. Ooh, that green wall's a little rough. I don't know if I would do that today. This was supposed to be frosted glass, like super frosted, so you're not supposed to see into the toilet rooms. That clearly didn't come through the rendering. But you can see there's actually kind of a neat design feature. We've got all these non-coplanar walls and these angles and stuff, and then there's just a simple framed box that's penetrating them. That's what you're seeing there, and that's the master bedroom. Kind of cool. Some pretty cool materials though. They actually, like this concrete and stuff rendered really nice. Pretty cool. Okay, so but what you'll notice is that, I use this process, but I've made a, we're in the bathroom. I've made a model that is completely usable, right? It's you can make sections, elevations, floor plans, even renderings. Now in Enscape, you can see up here, pretty cool. And it really all started with that mass, paying attention to that mass, and that mass drives everything. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into another project. And if you don't have any questions, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll jump back into it. But I think that's a cool introduction to, hopefully that's useful, an introduction to how to approach something like this. And I think this one's unique because, it was completely model based, right? I used a physical model, then I redrew the physical model as a virtual, sketch model, and then I finessed it, and eventually I skinned it and created a Revit model out of it. And then I've got all my sections, elevations, floor plans, etc. Sweet. All right, let's do this. So now, before we jump into the final project, I wanted to jump through one. Gary just asked how I walked up the stairs in Enscape. I walked up the stairs in Enscape by walking. No, you have to, if you press spacebar, you go from fly mode to walk mode, which means you're physically walking like in a video game. And that allows you to walk upstairs and a few other things. Okay, so now let me back out and go back to one of this. So the next one I wanted to do, and this one I'm going to touch on really quickly because it's a cool project. The model itself is pretty cool. So let me go back. Here we go. But it's an example of how you don't have to be beholden to a mass for everything, only for some specific things. So this is a pretty cool project, and this is one where I didn't use a sketch model to design it. I used sketching to design it. Floor plans, elevation sections, and drafting back and forth and figuring things out. But there's this planetarium thing in the middle there, And so yeah, all of this stuff here, you'll notice, you know, it's all just floors, walls, windows, doors, etc. Right? So if I go into the model there, you know, all of this that's a roof. You know, this is a wall. These are walls, railings, floors. So you know, all of this stuff here is just basic Revit modeling. You know, anyone can do this stuff using the standard out of the box tools. You know, there's some curved walls, but they're all just walls. They're straight, right? But then you get to this piece, and it's like, you know, you've got this half dome thing with 2 layers, right? Because I wanted the inside layer. It's actually it's a planetarium thing, so that was going to glow different color. Then I've got this ring and this little thing sticking out, and then glass, whatever, right? And so what you can do is you can model just to make a specific element within your building, and that's what I think Dave was just mentioning. So if I look at what this is, and again, even 9 years later, guess what's still in there? My mass. I didn't delete it. So look what's driving this thing. It's a mass. So if I unhide this, right, you can see there's a mass, and then I'll show you how that mass is built. And that's it. Okay, it's a cool shape. But you'll notice because I have different faces and the way I extruded or the way I sort of used voids and stuff, now I have 3 or 4 different faces that I can pick from. And that's the key with using these masses is, first, you don't have to, you don't have to do your entire building by it. But what you could do, so let me just pull this out a little bit, is so if I pull this out here, you know, by being careful with how you add voids and slice faces, it allows you to do things like, instead of covering this whole thing with one wall, you can actually just cover these 2 faces, but then the top piece, if you want, you can use a curtain system. I can pick a face and then pick another face. Oops, and then click create system. Oops, I just picked one face, sorry. But you get the idea. So there's a curtain system there. Oh, I clicked the inside of that face. That's weird. Let me undo that. Let me add this face now. There we go. So just by adding voids, it creates a new face, and you don't have to use the same thing throughout it, right? So that's basically how this was made. Now if I add some grids to this, add some grids to this, and I hide it, you'll see that's what we have. Remember, I hide it, not delete it. So that's it. So you don't have to, your entire building doesn't necessarily have to be masked. You know, that's another piece of it too. It's only where you absolutely need to get over that hump, get over that restriction, so to speak, that Revit has. And so I have quite a few models like this where I have a bunch of typically modeled stuff, and then I'm using a mass within my model to develop that piece of it. Cool. So, pretty cool example there. 2 different types of examples, right? Man, that wine really dried my throat out. Let me know if you guys have any questions on what I just showed, and then I'm going to jump into my last example because it's already 8:15. If you guys like this type of session, you know, shoot me in the chat now or in the comments, or shoot me an email. Let me know, and I could do other types just like this. You know, sort of breaking down and trying to show you how some of these projects are made. Another thing too is a lot of these projects are the sample files. If you want the sample files, members of the BIM After Dark community, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a learning platform that I have. There's actually over 100 members now. We surpassed 100 members, which is so freaking cool. Where I've got 4 full-length courses. There's a social media type of piece of it where you can ask questions. And then with all that stuff, there's sample files, including all of the tutorials that I have on my website, any of the tutorials you have in the revitkit.com. And so if you're interested in that, check it out at community.bimafterdark.com. I'll post it in the chat right now. But the only reason why I bring that up is these projects and some others are they're all part of, or all available as to members. So within courses or within posts. So definitely, if you're interested with that, check it out, and you can literally download all these models that I'm showing here, which is pretty sweet. So, oops. Oh, you're not seeing my screen right now. Okay. I just did some weird like minimize all thing, which I didn't hit thing, but whatever. Okay. Alright, so let me just make sure that is the mask the only way to get this kind of shape? Alright, let me pull up my camera. So Sebastian, thanks for the question, dude. So Sebastian asks, is the mask the only way to get that shape? Great question, because guess what? The technically speaking, there may be other ways to do it. And, you know, I'm talking massing, and I keep saying massing. Let me unhide this. Apparently I hide a bunch of stuff. But me personally, just because I used Revit long before conceptual massing existed, you know, I usually try my best, if I can, to model things using traditional modelings before I jump into conceptual massing. It's just sort of in my brain. But I don't think this particular shape you'd be able to get to, only because of that slanted revolve. But you might be able to if you did a revolve and then did some fancy version of a sweep revolve or a void revolve. It's plausible. Knowing me, I probably tried that first and then just said screw it. Here I am. So I think, looking at this here, I think you may have the ability to make this conceptually or in the traditional family environment. I think so, yeah. But this one was definitely easier in conceptual massing for me. It's something if you know if you're interested in creating models and authoring models and stuff, you know, you want to learn both. It's just valuable to know both in Revit, not just know traditional, not just know massing. You got to know a little bit of both, because then you know the limitations and the possibilities. A lot of things you can make in both. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff, for example, that Andy Milburn was showing for episode 19, I think it was, which was the rebuilding of Notre Dame. You know, a lot of that stuff Andy even said himself, they try to do it traditional first. And I've seen some really, really crazy models built in traditional modeling. So yes, usually you can do it in both. It doesn't really make a difference. Once you're creating the mask, joining geometry, making faces, then you can apply walls to it, so it doesn't really make a huge difference. And Dave Patterson said a blended sweep would do that trick. Yes, probably. It might get a little funky, but once you join it and stuff, it's fine. So yeah, like I said, I do think that you could build it in the traditional. And you know, there's some people who would argue most of the things besides like twisting forms or non-coplanar surfaces, you could probably do in both. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. So yeah. Awesome. Jeremy asked, would I use this process as a reference for a standard model building to create a generative facade? I'm not sure what you mean, unless if you mean by generative facade, you're flexing the mass and generating options, then yeah, sure. Otherwise, I'm not sure where this would come into play, but I think I kind of see what you're saying. But yeah, so I mean, this goes into play, you know, with anything that if you're applying to a face that's non-coplanar and goofy and all over the place, then you know, that's where this comes into play. And I guess as far as generative design is concerned, if you built these families or these masked families to be parametric, and then you have the ability to drive those geometries, so maybe it's just a surface that's wobbling back and forth, or changing the waviness of it or something, and that's your generative piece of it, you know, generating through options and figuring out results, then I don't see why not. This is exactly what you could do. I do think that depending on how the generative design is set up, you may need your actual facade itself to be a parametric piece and not hosted to something, but that's way beyond, I think, the question that you're asking. So, Beth Ann, hey Beth, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. So for inside the planetarium, did you create another smaller mass inside? So let's take a look at what I did. It was 9 years ago, so I might need to check myself, but let's see. Where'd it go? Here we go. So inside, oh, because there was a second face in there. Yeah, so actually that's a good segue into the next project too. So what you'll notice here, if I slice this guy, I just hid the mask real quick. So if I slice this guy, I have to say, if you guys haven't gone back and checked out some of your work from like, years and years and years ago, it's so much fun to go through. Things like this where, freaking terrace surfaces and underground stuff. It's just like, what were you thinking? Okay, so this one in here, yeah, I probably had a second mass. Let me check it out. So you can see I had two masses. I had one on the inside, and then I had one for the outside. And that's a perfect. So I needed two masses in order to make this piece inside the piece, which was whatever. I don't remember exactly what the heck I was doing in here, but either way. So yeah, so that's a great question because that also drives into the next example. So man, it's almost like I planned that with you, Beth. Thank you so much. So hopefully that answers your question, and that jumps me right into this project. Which is the infamous Helsinki competition. So, as I mentioned in the very beginning, and as somebody so rightfully pointed out, this was a competition that lots of people went after. It was an open competition worldwide for a Guggenheim in Helsinki, and so we decided to submit. It was just, generally it was fun. I think at the end of the day there was 1,850 submissions or something like that. And lo and behold, 7 years later, the project is never going to happen. So, congratulations to the winners. Sorry, but they had some beautiful reference photos, and so making these renderings and photoshopping into the reference photos, our building was just so much fun. So there's a rendering there, and these are Revit native renderings photoshopped in. There's a night one, which is kind of neat. A little over, it's pretty cool. And then there's some diagrams here just to show what it was. So it was an art gallery, it was the Guggenheim, and so we came up with a design scheme that. Let's see if there's any pictures there. That's kind of a cool image. So basically, in Helsinki, there's a lot of courtyards. It's all the buildings essentially have courtyards, and so we came up with a design scheme that was basically a courtyarded building where the one part was broken and then tilted up, and then we added in the middle here just as sort of a fulcrum, what we ended up calling the Death Star, but it was just this wild, olive pit looking thing in the martini, whatever. But as far as the design is concerned, it is what it is. Remember, we're not critiquing design at this point in time. I just think it's a really cool looking building. But how we built it is where it's really cool. So the one thing you'll notice here is there's a lot of layers to this facade. Okay, so if I cut a section through this. Whoop. And this is one where I will fully admit that this was extremely design oriented for the competition. So the interior and the guts of this are pretty lacking. Not to say they're not there, but they're pretty lacking. I think we might have actually had an interior model separate. I don't remember, or we photoshopped the crap out of it. But hey, look at this little man there. Hey, what's up, dude? That's our boy Alex. Everyone in the Revit world knows who Alex is, and Leroy. All right. So what you'll notice is that if I zoom into this, there's a bunch of layers to this thing, right? There's an interior wall, which is the slat backup. Oops, I just went to hit a line. There's this rain screen. There's this vertical element, and then in some areas there's also, a curtain wall in there. So, how do we manage that, right? And that's why Beth's question was such a perfect. Question for the timing, because that's kind of what I want to get into, is if you plan on taking this approach, you can build your massing to be ready for that, right? So this is what's really cool. The massing for this is actually not that difficult. If I was to notice how there's a point here and there's a point here, if I go to wireframe, there's one. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm trying to see if you can see that. There's one set of, maybe shaded would be better. Yeah, shaded is better. There's one set of reference lines, and then everything is just a sweep off of that reference line. And then and it's actually manipulable. I can modify this. I'm not going to do it right now, but if I grab one of these points and I modify it, maybe we should try it. Why not? Ta-da! Most of the things went. So what we did here is, you'll notice there's just a bunch of sweeps that follow this, but we have layers of them. And then each of these layers, if I was to highlight this one, you'll notice that the visibility of them, so on the top left here, you can change the visibility of them. We have these visibility parameters that say boxes on off, glass and slat on off, slat interior on off, slat wall on off, and sphere on off. So we built our layers into this family, and then when we bring it into the project, what I can do, I actually, let me bring it in, go back to the project. Oof. I should probably close the other ones. Don't you just love tabs when it comes to that? So now when you bring this mass into a project, massing 2, come on. You'll notice all I'm seeing is one face, but if I go in here, I don't know why I didn't do instances here. That's all right. I have these checkboxes, and I can turn on all the layers. What that allows me to do, even the sphere, see the sphere's layer, is I can apply a face and then work my way out or in. So like if I want to apply a slat wall face, so if I go into curtain system and I have, you see we have all these horizontal and vertical slats. So if I say vertical slat and I say create system, and of course I click the wrong one, try that again. I click the outside face of this, and I say create system. You can see we got some there. Then what I can do is I can select this mass and I can turn off that layer if I want to. Okay, so which one is it? Let's see, slat wall? Sure. So now that layer's off, and then I can go in and I can pick the next layer. So maybe the next layer is going to be my interior whatever wall. I don't know what it's called, but let's just say it's going to be this sphere wall just for fun. So now I'm in here and I'm picking inside these. And then I can do the next thing and I can hide it and turn it off, etc. But that's how you can start, and you can actually build into your family, you know, this layer system that can drive your entire project. Okay? And so, again, you notice how in every one of these projects, the mass is still there. I guess one way, if you really wanted to, that you could possibly hide the mass without... you know, maybe a little safer is you could just leave some sort of an element, a selection element somewhere, and then just have visibility parameters. But I don't know, like a selection element somewhere off in space. I don't know what that would do to everything, but either way. And so then that's how I was able to layer this thing and develop what you see over here, which is, of course the mass is on now. Let me hide the mass. Even to the point where, you know, I added faces for the curtain walls on the inside. All right, so you can see, let me pull a section there. So every single layer of this building essentially has a face that followed that sweep, you know, that swept pattern that had a visibility parameter. So let me go in here. I don't know what's happening in there, but I'm not sure why that wall is there, but that's all right. You can see how there's a curtain wall back behind this slat too, which is kind of neat. So yeah, and then the sphere, you know, it's just a sphere, and these are walls by face to select the walls. Then you have a little fun with materials and so on, and rendering, and that's how you can get to like this. These are actually Revit native renderings as well. So this was native Revit renderings back in 2000, whatever year it was. I don't know if they were cloud renderings. Probably not, but... Alright. What do you guys think? Pretty cool? Any questions on that stuff? I'll give you a second. Pretty neat. Oh, I meant to actually post. I did an article about this in 2015. I don't remember when the competition was, but I did an article about it on the blog. So if you want to check it out in detail about this project, with some cool hand sketches and renderings and digging through all the content there. I just posted it in the chat, and I'll post the link in the comments afterwards. So, well, I got through all 3 projects, which is awesome. If you have any questions, ask there. The layers parameters inside the massing. Yes, they are visibility parameters inside the massing of that. So you can turn them on and off however you need to. So basically just select the element and set the visibility as its own parameter. It's an on-off parameter, and you have the ability to modify it. So super powerful, super useful. I think you can do it by face in massing, which is kind of cool too. You could take a face from an entire object, but Ernesto asked, if you modified your conceptual mass family and deleted a plane instead of adjusting it, would that also be a no-no? Yes. So anything by face is using that face, which is, like everything else in Revit, is a unique element. So if you modify that face to a certain point, it'd be fine. But if you deleted that face and drew some new facing, you would be replacing. Just think about it reasonably, right? If it's that dramatic of a change, you're obviously going to be remodeling things, which means you're just re-clicking it. But it shouldn't break other parts of it that are added to it. So, you'll see, and you saw in those examples, there was a cognizant and thoughtful way that I approach these masses for my uses, and so you have to think about that. And it'll come in time, and you probably will break some stuff and get some frustrations out, but I can tell you right now, these are only 3 projects, and I could literally pull up dozens that I've done in the past 10 years that all use this process for design. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, thank you for joining me, by the way. This was awesome. I'm surprised I got through all 3 projects. I wasn't really sure I was going to. But make sure you subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. And hit the notification bell so you know when I'm live, which is pretty cool. And check me out at therevitKid.com. I am Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid. You can find me also on Twitter at the Revit Kid, or shoot me an email. You can find it on the website. I see one or two more questions coming in before I completely wrap it up. Sebastian said, "What do you think about using Dynamo to get those shapes?" I mean, you can. I don't really see the point in that. If you had something that was driven, that was algorithmically driven, I guess is the thought, then sure. But that mass is just a sweep around it. There's no reason. I mean, it would take a lot more work for you to make a Dynamo script to draw the mass for that particular project than it would be just to draw the mass for that project. So I'm a huge fan of Dynamo, but there's really no reason to do it in there. Plus, I guess the only reason you would want to do it is maybe you could drive through and generate different things. But Eric just showed up. Thanks for showing up, Eric. Check out the replay, and you'll get all the content. The replay will be live on the blog at therevitkid.com. And yeah. Oh, one last thing too. Be sure to check out all of the free resources I have at free.bimafterdark.com. I'll post those down there. I have a bunch of really cool free stuff, including a free Twinmotion course from Revit to Twinmotion. So check that out. Make sure you download all those resources. And I hope to see you guys all next week. Have a lovely night and a great weekend. For us in America, it's Labor Day weekend, so we have a long weekend. So hopefully you guys do too. And with that, I'm going to bid you all adieu and have a lovely night.